26 years ago, the legendary sword of Victoria, the King's Repose, was found missing. At the Cumberland estate, a young Allerdale runs away from a party to her family's ancient Steam Knight armor, where she overheard two men plotting to kill the king. She climbed out the window, where she was caught by a golden beast, with Siege riding on his back and the King's Repose in her hands. The beast told Allerdale that one day, she and Vina will meet again. People soon gathered and began to clap and cry. Alexandrina found the King's Repose. They called it a miracle. The maid finds Allerdale, who tells her that when she grows up, she will become a Steam Knight. But a miracle did not happen. The king was hanged, the Steam Knights disappeared, the Cumberlands were taken in by the Duke of Castor. For the next 26 years, Victoria was without a king. In the palace of Westaleg, Theresis begins to talk about a dream where the Sarkaz stood between catastrophes and Londinium, where the people welcomed them into the city, where those on the throne extended their hands and called them friends. A dream where the Sarkaz fought off the demons and the ocean, and all the other races stood together with them. It was Theresa's dream, for a future they could have. She had also told him that the world once belonged to the Sarkaz. The dead still mutter about the Sanctus betrayal. Entire bloodlines were lost. History was forgotten. Casdale's ruins laid across Terra. And then they said, the Sarkaz invaded our homes. Amia receives a report that the main Sarkaz forces are returning to Londinium, meaning that they will likely begin the war with the dukes surrounding the city. The clouds around the shard are in fact catastrophe clouds, and when the construction is complete, it will be able to launch catastrophes targeting anywhere in the world. To stop that from happening, Clovisia and the Doctor decide to sabotage the supply lines to the shard. To do that, they have to find its location, and thus they decide to attack the city's command tower to steal the intel. Allerdale also reveals that Calcid got the key to Londinium's crypt from Way, which contains the King's Repose, a sword rumored to have the power to cut through catastrophes. Allerdale makes a deal with a businessman to transport some shipments into the city, but the man demands more compensation for something so risky, and Allerdale is forced to sell out the Steam Knight armor. Siege knows that the armor means a lot to Allerdale, and after finding out what happened, she goes to the man with Glasgow, and after some convincing and blackmailing, the man agrees to leave the armor alone. The shipments arrive, and out of the boxes comes a squad of mercenaries led by Totter. Their movement is discovered by the Sarkaz, and Allerdale is wounded while escaping. Siege sends the others with the Self-Salvation Corps to their home base, while she and Allerdale take a shorter route to the Cumberland estate to treat her wounds. She remembers the path where she returned with the King's Repose, but doesn't seem to recall the details. While patching Allerdale up, they begin to talk about how things could have been, and how things could be. Siege left early the next day, while Allerdale and her butler packed their things. The butler brought out the Steam Knight armor, but it's too big to take with them. Seeing the armor again, Allerdale is reminded about her dream of becoming a Steam Knight, but at this point, she has already grown up. A fire swallows the entire estate. A voice tells Allerdale to return to her target before the Sanguine Arch comes, and that the Duke won't have her acting out of line. She thinks she saw the armor rise up and breathe fire. In the past, she had hoped that her ancestors could return in the armor to help her through hardships, but were that to happen now, it will only be her nightmare. Meanwhile, the Sanguine Arch brings another noble to the burning estate. All the while he's trying to say that he has nothing to do with the Self-Salvation Corps and that everything is the Cumberland's fault. The Sanguine Arch tells him that if he goes into the fire and checks if there's no survivors, he can leave alive. He lifts his finger, and the noble begins to run as if something is chasing him. But he trips and falls, and blood bursts out of his body. Stainless takes the Doctor to the factory that his grandmother, Catherine, works at. Catherine is not happy to see him, since Stainless ran off a year ago to join the Self-Salvation Corps. Stainless says they're only here to ask about the supply line, and they won't get the factory in trouble. His friends try to put in some good word for him, but Catherine is the boss here, and she shuts them up. She asks Stainless if he knows how many people died during the mess they made on the Londinium wall, and Stainless couldn't answer. She says she knows him well, that he thinks he's smart, but smarts don't work on death. A bunch of Sarkaz mercenaries suddenly arrive, and orders Catherine to go with them. Catherine says it's too sudden, and she needs some time to hand off her work. She goes back to the factory and tells Stainless and the doctor to follow. After a long walk, Catherine brings them to an empty workshop, where the Steam Knight's armor were once made. It was staffed by the workers that she taught, including Stainless' father. 26 years ago, during the conflict within Londinium, the factory was shut down and the workers went to protest, and none of them ever came back. Catherine asks Stainless that if he survives the war but the others didn't, if he wants to return to an empty workshop like she has to. Stainless says that he can't say he thought everything through, but he can't stop now. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to face the people who have sacrificed their lives. Catherine tells the doctor to look after her grandson, and to find a journal in her dorm, where she recorded the possible locations of the supply line in anticipation of Stainless coming back. After retrieving it, Stainless notices the other workers gathering, and one of them tells him that the Sarkaz are executing the senior workers who knows too much, and they're not going to sit around and do nothing. Stainless requests Rose Island's help, and the doctor calls Ascalon. The Self-Salvation Corps come to pick up the workers. Stainless tells Catherine that although he has never seen the Steam Knights, he has seen her working away on the assembly line. And to him, she will always be his hero. The next day, Rose Islands and the Self-Salvation Corps launch their attack on the command tower, and using the battle as a cover, Siege and Allerdale's group goes underground to find the King's Repose. They arrive at an enormous gateway, but blood is seeping through under the door, and all around them are Sarkaz weapons. From the color of the blood, it seems that this happened several years ago. Siege has Indra and Morgan stay behind to watch their backs, and with the key, she opens the gates. The tomb is lined with statues of the past kings, both Draco and Aslan. Around the statues, they find countless Sarkaz corpses, containing elites from the Sarkaz court and Confessarius soldiers. And further in, they find the Steam Knights. Siege realized why the Steam Knights had disappeared. They were betrayed and ambushed here. The Knights are loyal to the king, and with the king dead, the dukes can't have loyalists still around. And one or two dukes don't have the power to assemble all of the Knights. For all of them to be here means all of the dukes were in on it. The Knights were betrayed by Victoria. Further in is the King's Repose, a seemingly normal sword. As Siege picks it up, Allerdale suddenly presses a knife against her, and the mercenaries restrain Dagda. Allerdale pleads with Siege to hand over the sword. Siege says whatever duke is behind her doesn't want it for the sake of Victoria. She actually remembers her meeting with Allerdale over 20 years ago in the Cumberland estate, and reminds her of the promises they made together. But Allerdale refuses to back down. She says she has lost too much, that she can only grab onto what she's sure of. Fate pushed her to where she is now, and she has no choice on the matter. An armor suddenly begins to move. None of the mercenaries' weapons work against it. It stands up and walks towards Siege. A Steam Knight has somehow survived. The Knight has forgotten his name. He doesn't know why he was betrayed. All he knows is that he must protect Victoria. But what is Victoria? Is it the king, the dukes, or the people? All there's left is the sword. Finden. The sword will be his Victoria. He won't allow anyone to take his Victoria. The knight charges towards them. Allerdale feels relieved. It will be a fitting end for a traitor to die here. but Siege tells her to shut up about it. She says they have to get out of here first, and if Allerdale still wants the sword, she can fight her for it after they're out. Again, Allerdale remembers that she says she'll grow up to be a Steam Knight. And she says, screw the Dukes and all of that, she's tired of it. She activates her arts, and a gust of wind grabs the others and pushes them out of the crypt, as the statues of the kings crumbled, sealing her and the Steam Knight inside. The battle at the control tower is not progressing smoothly. Closure is trying to hack into the system with the drones, Ascalon is occupying Manfred, and Logos and Amia are fighting back the Sanguine Arch. The vampire says that the banshees he knew were their most appreciated hunters, but now they've lost their ways and wrapped themselves up like Lithanian casters. Logos replies that the Sanguine Arch is the one who's lost. Theresa has shown him light, and it's impossible for him to step back into the darkness. The ghoul army returns before anyone can notice. A corruption begins to spread on the battlefield that saps the life out of the soldiers until Shining stops it, and she says the Sarkaz can gain powers from death. Kalsa gives the retreat order, and the doctor tries to contact Amia, but PRTS can't get through to her. Amia hears a voice call out to her. All the Sarkaz begin to be affected by some strange arts, and the only one who can do that is the Lord of Fiends. The Sanguine Arch tells Amia that she doesn't deserve Theresa's crown, that she never understood the essence of the Sarkaz. He welcomes her to look into his anger, to hear the wailing of the dead, so they can tell her that the Sarkaz and their invaders were never the same race, that Kazdel should have been synonymous with Terra. Amia hears the cries of the children who lost their parents, the Banshee practicing the spells he just learned, the vampire laughing as he turns his enemies into blood. She sees the war 200 years ago. The armies of Gaul, Lithania, and Victoria razed another Kazdel to the ground. She sees the figure leading the armies declare that the Sarkaz vengeance will scar the land forever, and must be destroyed for peace in the next 200 years. She sees the heroes of Kazdel take up the banner and charge towards the armies, with countless following in their footsteps. Who are you to determine whether Kazdel should fall? Who are you to judge the actions of the Sarkaz? Why don't you answer my question, Kalsit? Amia falls off the tower. Logo slowed her fall, and the doctor catches her. A Sarkaz approaches them. A Sarkaz who has left his throne, left the powers he never cared for, and came here, and looked at them with the coldest gaze in the past 200 years. He slashes at Amia. Once again, you chose to be the Sarkaz enemy. Just as I've warned you before, I will kill you again, Kalsit. Siege simply told the others that Allerdale sacrificed herself to protect them. From the burnt-down estate, they found the Steam Knight armor that somehow survived the fire. Siege wishes that Allerdale could have seen it, so she could know that not all hope was lost. Shining manages to stabilize Kalsa's condition. The doctor asks Ascalon what happened 4 years ago at Babel, and Ascalon says she was ordered by the doctor to leave on a mission, and when she returned, Theresa was gone. Amia was unconscious from inheriting the Lord of Fiend's powers, and Kalsa went to save her and the doctor from Theresa's army. Amia wakes up and begins to cry. She says there must have been a reason for what Kalsa did, but Theresa showed her the voices of the dead to tell her why she's on their side, and even now they are hovering above Londinium. The catastrophe clouds above opened up, revealing a massive airship. Under its gaze, the enemies of the Sarkaz will have nowhere to hide.